Hotep,
Yes, sir.
you created your own comic books. You've created your own anime, which is way more impressive to me. I mean, I know comic book creators, it's not an easy job, but to make your own actual anime is amazing. So how do I create my own anime?
Man. Okay, so as you guys know, there's no one way of creating anything, right? And from what I understand, anime came from a space of lack, if you will. Like what I mean is you have a standard of animation set probably by Disney here in the United States, and then you have another community of people that want to express themselves in a similar way but don't have the same resources. And so they find a utilizing their creativity. And for me, I always like to use the expression, because it's been my own journey. The lack of resources has forced me to become very resourceful, right? I find that spirit similar and akin to what the Japanese did with what they created with anime, and the way that animation, how they took still images and just things that you typically would not see in a Disney movie, but made it fly and made it cool. It's almost like hip hop culture, taking something that you don't have a lot of access to and just flipping it and recontorting it in that kind of manner. So I say all that to preface that for me, my anime is very different than a lot of people's today, because I wasn't going after the standard that is set right now with current animation. I actually created a retro style anime brand. And so my books, my animation, even my video games are all things that would remind you of what you saw in the 80s, right? My anime in particular, my reference point was Voltron, 80s
Nice.
Voltron,
There you
80s
go.
Voltron. And
You
I'm
mean
sure
the real Voltron?
the real Voltron, the real Transformers, the real
Yeah.
Thundercats, and all of that. So, it appeals. So it would appeal to people that remember that time, that appreciate that time. And so ultimately, I found a lot of inspiration in Voltron, and the fact that it even at that time was very different from Thundercats and Transformers, because in Voltron in particular, you would see still images that they were just putting backgrounds to and just animated backgrounds. So in any case, that's the long answer to your short question of I piecemealed memories from the 80s, and also decided that I was going to create a retro styled animation, because I didn't have a lot of resources. Some of my friends tell me, if you want animation, it'll cost you, $50 a second, $100 a second, sometimes up to $1,000 per second. So what I did was I piecemealed mine together. I found somebody to do animation. I found somebody else to do music. I do the editing. And then so combining different skills from different people from around the world, because I have an international team that helps me with this. I even have a different person that does sound, I do the sound effects. So I take sound effects from multiple different resources online. And then I have somebody that actually does special effects on top of that. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, a lot of layers to the animation that I have. I'm very proud of it, though. And then even when it came to voices, right? Like my first anime was strictly narrated, right? It didn't have dialogue with different voice actors. And I did that for several reasons. It was a lot easier. It was cheaper. I didn't have to rely on, people and their attitudes for, it's just easier for me to manage. I'm so in any case, that's how I did my anime. Very different, I'm sure, from what you would hear from other people today.
So what I'm hearing you say, because you counted off about 4 or 5 different pieces that you got over the world. So by combining the forces of the 5 individuals, you came together to form one giant robot anime. I get it. Real life takeaways here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And see, and I get it, man. I would have said G.I. Joe looking at your page, and I've watched like a few of the episodes, like the style. It does have that high quality 80s vibe to it. And I honestly did not realize you did some video games as well. So that's very cool. That's a whole nother. I think Kurt used to help with video games. Joe's dabbling in animation. We've got a friend who does a comic book. It's a lot. It's a lot to do any one of those, and you've done 3 of them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Charles, you cannot say anything about any bad dad jokes tonight after that.
It wouldn't have been bad if the scotch didn't get in the way. It'd have been smooth. The forces of Voltron. It may be a bad geek joke. It's because my kids would not understand that joke, so it's not a bad dad joke. It doesn't.
So Hotep, I'm not familiar with your anime because I just haven't watched it yet.
No problem.
Because he hates you. That's why Hotep. I'm sorry, Kurt. Yeah. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for.
Kurt, you can head on over to blacklionandcubs.com and you can watch it there.
There you go. Thank you. And look, I'm not the one that called me Krampus.
That's
just
true.
saying.
That is true.
So my question to you though was, is one of the places that you took your inspiration from? Were you familiar with Akira at the time? Because I
wasn't.
Yeah, because that was that late '80s, But it was it really was the high end anime at the time. At least all that we were exposed to here in the States. But it sounds just from what you've described that you've had to be really creative with how you managed it with the resources that you had, and I think that's awesome because that ends up being its own kind of subgenre.
And that's what I really like about it. And it's something that I speak a lot at length to my fellow creatives. Being indie is a very freeing thing because you don't have to follow the rules. In fact, you create the rules. When you're the owner, when you're the creator and you're outside of the industry, you really have the freedom to do things that, a lot of people can't and won't even consider. And to your point about Akira, I didn't even know in the 80s that there was such thing as anime. For me, it was just cartoons. It was just what we watched after school. Yep. I didn't even know Voltron was an anime until many years later,
Well, because we didn't know any better.
Right,
it was like, that's just what was on.
That was just on TV,
yeah. Aging myself here, but I remember going into like a Blockbuster or whatever and going, why does that say animation and this says anime? And I had to ask somebody, what's the difference? And the snot-nosed little Blockbuster kid was like,
actually.
Yeah, exactly. Anime is not animation. It is from Japan. I was like, okay, dude, I'm just asking a question. But yeah, it's a whole different vibe. And I think it's a whole different style of storytelling. And when you say anime versus animation, I brought up G.I. Joe. Well, that was to sell a product. You're not doing that. You're telling a story. And to me, that's one of the key differences between animation and animes. Anime is almost always telling a story, and they sell a lot of product, but they're telling a story. Whereas, you can pick anything your kids watch today, and it's like, okay, it's kind of cool, but it's also, we know it's trying to push toys out into the store.
Absolutely.
So, Joe, what questions you have? Yeah.
I was going to ask, so you mentioned a lot of the different people and talents that you collected along the way, and a lot of the ones you mentioned people would think of. What's the weirdest hurdle in your journey that you've had to overcome? Or just one that came out of nowhere and you just weren't expecting?
I wasn't expecting, I won't call it backlash, but I wasn't expecting. So let me just preface all this. I created Black Lion and Cubs simply because I was exposing my children to the things that I grew up on, right? Voltron being one of them, Mega Man being another, like my own childhood. Don't ask anything about Voltron. Mega Man, because my children know Zero, Dr. Wily. It's all in my house, right? So I was exposing them to things I grew up on, and then my niece, who was living in our basement, was sharing with them some of today's anime. Now I don't know anything about today's anime. Okay, I'm not an anime head like that. You understand? It's just something that my days of fandom were the 80s, and I was into everything that was part of pop culture in the 80s. My niece exposed my children to today's anime, and what I saw was extremely violent, extremely over sexualized and just totally inappropriate.
Sure, yeah.
But my children were attracted to it. And so because I've been a long time creative, person, I've always, if I create at will, I said, oh, daddy can do that. You know what I'm saying? You guys like that. That's the energy that led to creating Black Lion and Cubs. So that being said, as I got into this space now as, 50-year-old man and father, I didn't realize that, which I should have, because I'm part of, certain cultures here in the United States as well. But what caught me off guard, at least, was the fact that you have, these purists in the anime nerd space that may not take too well to one, being a black person, right, having, creating anime and saying I'm creating anime, because some people believe that you have to be Japanese to create anime. Right. And so, I've had to deal with that early, and I've had to, push back and say, look, saying only Japanese can create anime is just as ignorant as saying only black people can create hip hop. You understand? Like, it's just as, so that's one thing that caught me by guard, is the fact that you have such a very passionate, purist component in that culture. But it shouldn't have taken me off guard, because I felt the way as part of the hip hop culture. And you have the purists and the pimps, right? And you're always dealing with the purist community who's, just about everything that's raw and just totally against the finances and the economic side of things. Mm-hmm. And then you have the pimps, people will come in and do it for the money. And so I should have prepared myself for that as I entered this space, but it did catch me off guard.
I get that. Every community has a gatekeeper, and I've been working with Dragon Con for, I don't know now, 8-9 years. And it's still, as much as the heart of Dragon Con is, we welcome all walks of life. We have so many different levels of content, this and that and the other. You will still run into gatekeepers there, like, well, if you don't Dragon Con this away, it's not real. It's like, everybody enjoys what they enjoy. And it's really good. While we're at it, so I just did share a second ago your actual website. I'm going to pop it up again here on the screen so people can see the art style and whatnot. So this is on YouTube. And then is that the easiest place to find your content?
So I would say between my website and my IG, my Instagram at Black Lion and Cubs are the easiest. I update my IG. That's the one I personally attend to. IG and TikTok, and everything's consistent at Black Lion and Cubs. The other thing, to answer your question about the anime, is, which is a lot of people, what a lot of people don't know, is I also utilize a lot of different art styles and animators. So if anyone that watches that first video at the top that you shared, you will see multiple different styles of art within that trailer. And so that's also what it has helped me.
This story starts with my
I'll turn this on. I'm just going to scroll through like you're talking about here.
Yeah, so that's one artist, right? Or one animation team. Keep going, keep scrolling through. That's the same animation team right there. Okay, keep going. All right, here it comes. That's another one right here. This is a different one.
You should click the X on the more videos so that it gets rid of it.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
All right. Joe's our YouTube expert. All right. I see.
So that's the second one. Yeah. That's the second one. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. This is the third one. That's the third animation team.
Yeah, I see it in the faces. Okay.
And then another one. Here's a fourth one right here. This is a fourth one.
I see. Now that's very 80s animation right there.
Yep.
And then there's one more at the end. As you get closer to the end, you'll see a fifth animation style. This guy right here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Faces are the easiest way to see that. So some people are really, really crazy about consistency, like the artists. So obviously you're all about the creative flow of the story, is what it sounds like.
So I'm about GSD, getting shit done. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
I got you.
Getting stuff done. Yeah, that's what I'm about. And at the end of the day, I'm a fan of art. Like, I'm just a fan. And so when I started the process, I hired one artist and I said, man, I like that. And I hired another one and I said, man, I like that too. I hired another one. I started seeing my characters being expressed in a variety of different ways. I enjoyed all of it. So I made a conscious decision not to commit to any one art style or any one artist. I wanted to, so if you look at my comics, for example, Volume 1 has one artist, Volume 2 has a second artist, Volume 3 had, each chapter has a different artist. So there's 3 artists in Volume 3. I'm a fan of comics. I came up on, Frank Miller, John Byrne, Art Adams, and all those. I can go down the names. So just like in Marvel, like, you saw them draw Spider-Man. All those artists drew Spider-Man, and I liked all of them. So I felt the same way when it came to the creation. And let me step back and say, I set off with this to create an anime brand, not just an anime cartoon series. So from the jump, I was thinking expansively as to all the different ways I could express my characters and my storyline. So that's the reason why you see so many different types of multimedia content created in such a short amount of time, because I thought that way from the onset. So yeah, so I have multiple different artists, and that was by design. And it also allows me to create a lot more in a faster period of time, because I'm creating, I can write faster than people can draw. So I might have 3 stories already, and then I have 3 artists working on 3 stories all at the same time. You see, as opposed to waiting for the same one to complete and move on.
Do you tend to pick your artists based on the type of story that you're trying to get drawn?
That's a good question. I had never done it that way. It was just simply, there was one artist whose inks I really liked. Because again, I hired multiple artists, and I have graphic novels. They're comic book in size, but they're manga in style and design.
Okay. Yep.
So they're black and white. You'll see the way they're written. They look more like manga. I like the classic black and white. I'll say for one artist in particular, I wanted him for season or series 2, Sands of Time, because of his dark and rich inks. Okay. And so that was in particular. And then I have another artist that I use specifically for the covers. And so his art style just was the way his lines were so dark and rich that I use his art primarily for the covers and for some of the promotional images that I utilize typically.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because when you were going through some of the classic 80s artists, Frank Miller, John Byrne, and thank you for saying Art Adams, because nobody talks about him anymore.
Man, he was phenomenal.
He was so great. Yeah.
Yes.
Just the line art.
I'm going to shout out Denny's Cowan, too. I need to shout him out for what he did with Power Man and Iron Fist. Kind of reminded me of Frank Miller, too.
Right, but to that point, I mean, you wouldn't hire Frank Miller well, I guess you could, to do a Powerpuff Girls series, right? Because that's not his vibe, right? He's that dark and gritty, and if you've got a hard hitting story, that's your guy.
You're right.
So that's why I was asking about the relationship of the storyline to the artists that you choose, because I dig the fact that you're choosing all these different art styles and artists, because it almost gives it an anthology type flavor to your books.
Yes.
And it's very cool.
Thank you. The only thing I can say is not so much for the story, but I did pick artists with keeping in mind that I was creating a family-friendly product.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, I did see some artists that did great horror type work that I would not hire because it's just, that's too gritty for young children.
Frank Miller, not quite the family-friendly guy.
but in his version of Powerpuff Girls, Mojo Jojo always wins.
They all live in Sin City.